Welcome to this e-lesson on Introduction to Instructional Design Process. There are four objectives that are covered in this e-lesson. First, we will look at the meaning of instructional design. Then we will identify and describe major activities of the instructional design process. We will look at the benefits of instructional design process. And finally, we will look at the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp ID model. So first, let's look at the instructional design. Before we talk about instructional design, there are two terms we need to understand. One is learning and the other is instruction. Learning is the development of new knowledge, skills, or abilities that brings in permanent change in behavior. And on the other hand, instruction is the arrangement of the environment to facilitate that learning. So how do you know that there is an instructional need? In instructional design, we call it a performance gap, which is a gap between existing and desired behavior. Like if you want a person to move from actual to optimal, then you will know that there is a need. So instructional design need is a performance need that can be solved by instruction. There are many definitions of instructional design, but I like Smith and Ragan's definition. They define instructional design as the systematic and reflective process of translating principle of learning and instruction into plans for instructional materials, activities, information resources, and evaluation. They have put together a model where everything fits together. So we have the broader circle of education, then we have instruction within that circle, and within instruction, we have training and teaching. So they define instruction as a systematic process that involves teachers, learners, materials, and learning environment in order to achieve successful and identified learning goals. On the other hand, training refers to those instructional experiences that are focused upon individuals acquiring very specific skills that they will normally apply almost immediately. And teaching refers to those learning experiences that are facilitated by a human being, kind of like a live teacher. I would like to introduce you to an organization called AECT, that stands for Association for Educational Communication and Technology. This organization is made by the leaders in our field. And they have come up with several definitions over the period of time. In 1994, the instructional technology was defined as the theory and practice of design, development, utilization, management, and evaluation of processes and resources for learning. And after 14 years, they realized a need for a newer definition in which they use the term educational technology instead of instructional technology and defined it as the study and ethical practice of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological processes and resources. So they brought in both learning and performance. Also, they changed some keywords such as creating, using, and managing. A few more definitions. Instructional design can be looked as a process. There are several models that can be used systematically through the various steps. It starts from analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Instructional design is also a discipline itself. It is a branch of knowledge that is concerned with research and theory about instructional strategies and the process for developing and implementing those strategies. Instructional design is also science of creating detailed specification for the development, implementation, evaluation, and maintenance of situations that facilitate learning. So that was a quick look at what ID is. And now let's look at the ID process activities. So this is the ADDIE framework, which is a systematic 5-step process that includes analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. There are other models created by different researchers that are based on the phases of ADDIE. So what does an instructional designer do? They design what is important for students to learn and then effectively arrange the learning environment for their learners. A lot of times people get confused and they either think that we are too much into technology or they think we are information designers. But we actually are instructional designers. I really like this visual because it lays out the various roles an instructional designer plays and all the things they do. These are the 7 premises that your chapter talks about, and I want to go over them quickly to understand the IDEE process. Number 1 is that the IDEE process requires attention to both systematic procedure and specificity for treating details within the plan. So you have to pay attention to detail to carry through the systematic process. And then the problem starts with the identification of the instructional design problem. If there's no problem, there's no need for us to even work on the project. The instructional design plan is a written document that is usually used by both the instructional designers and members of the team. The 4th premise is that while planning and working on the project, every effort should be made to provide for a level of satisfactory achievement rather than minimal achievement for all learners. So you want to improve your learners' performance and every student's performance. The success of an instructional product is dependent on accuracy, and you must meet the needs of the learners. Number 6, focus should be on the learners, not on the content. So getting to know the learners is the key for personalizing because your learners might be different from each other. And finally, there is no single best way to design instruction. The IDEE process benefits. There are several benefits of instructional design. Financial benefits. Instructional design can improve return on investment in training. It results in greater learning gains and also reduction in time taken to solve a performance problem. And some of the advantages are that it focuses on what learners will be able to do as a result of instruction. Also, the linkage between different components, for example, learning objectives and evaluations and the activities that the students will be doing. Instructional design is empirical because this is research-based. You do detailed learner analysis, contact analysis before you start your design. And it's also a replicable process. Procedures are consistent instruction. It produces consistent instruction, facilitates effective assessment methods, and applicable across settings. So in class, we will use Morrison, Ross, and Kemp's model. We chose this book and specifically this model because it's a very holistic model. It'll help us learn about the holistic learner approach to instructional design, that considers all factors in the environment, which is based on the model. And initially, instructional designers asked 4 questions, which is based on the characteristics of learners, learning objectives, instructional strategies, and the evaluations. So if you notice, this model consists of 9 different circles, and then there are other circles inside those circles. You can also see how different parts of the model are connected to the different phases of ADDIE framework, where some are focused on analysis, some are focused on design, some on development, implementation, and evaluation. So you will be reading the book and looking at all the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp steps, but at the same time, when you are submitting your project, you will be submitting the phases of ADDIE. So as you can see, the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp model consists of 9 key elements. The 9 circles that we saw So first, you identify the instructional problem, which is the key before designing anything. Then you will get to know your learners' characteristics and then subject content, and you do task analysis to know exactly what you want your learners to learn and what you want to teach them. Then you will identify the objectives, and then you will sequence the content for logical learning. Then identify the right strategies and plan the instructional message and delivery methods. And finally, evaluate instruments to assess objectives and also find resources to support instruction and learning activities. So these are the objectives we covered. We looked at the instructional design, the major activities of instructional design process, benefits, and then we looked at the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp ID model.